In the 1970s, London's police were baffled by a series of bizarre murders.
They were struggling to find any clues, they were struggling to find a real pattern, and they were getting murders all over the metropolitan area.
The perpetrator was a disturbed young man called Patrick Mackay.
He was like a little terrorist. He seemed to have a split personality.
And the last of his crimes was to be the most horrific of all.
He'd been murdered with an axe, with many, many blows to the head.
Even as a child, the warning signs were there.
One of the teachers described him as a potential murderer of women.
But was Patrick Mackay born to kill?
If ever the term cold-blooded applies to anybody, it was Patrick Mackay.
The London areas of Chelsea and Knightsbridge have always been home to the wealthy and powerful, full of luxury shops and high-end restaurants. But in the mid-70s, the peace here was shattered.
Well, the Metropolitan Police was confronted with a fairly extraordinary set of crimes. They were muggings, robberies, and also handbag snatches.
The area of London where these offences started to take place was very affluent, very trendy. They all came off the King's Road area. They spread down to the waterfront, which faces onto Battersea, and even today that is a very, very affluent area.
There was somebody out there who was mugging old ladies in a few isolated occasions, killing them. So certainly there was a feeling that there was a predator who was stalking them.
The mugger seemed to be befriending wealthy women, gaining access to their homes, and on occasion, he would murder them in cold blood.
Here you were dealing with a dangerous psychopath who could kill at any time and without warning.
In early 1974, one such heinous crime would shock London.
Isabella Griffiths was the widow of a surgeon, and she lived in Cheyne Walk, that's a very smart street, in Chelsea facing the River Thames. She was physically assaulted, probably strangled, but the murderer then also stabbed her.
The body of 84-year-old Isabella Griffiths lay undiscovered for almost 2 weeks.
She was found in the kitchen, stabbed through the solar plexus just below the heart with a knife, which was then rammed into the floor.
It appeared that Isabella Griffiths' murderer had established some kind of trust relationship by carrying her shopping or doing some other chores for her. At all events, he knew exactly where she lived and was able to persuade her to let him into her home. And that's where the crime took place.
Isabella Griffiths' murder provided no clues as to the perpetrator. The police were stumped, and the bag snatching and petty theft continued around London's more affluent areas. Then, almost 13 months later, on the 10th of March 1975, the killer struck again.
Adele Price lived in Lowndes Square. That's another fairly smart part of London. She was obviously a wealthy person. And just like the Griffiths case, the murderer had persuaded her to let him in to her premises, to try and get a glass of water or some other pretext. At all events, once he was in there, he attacked her.
The offender strangled the lady and she had her granddaughter lodging there who came home, and the granddaughter actually saw the offender, she didn't know it was the offender at the time, leaving the premises.
The murderer let himself out, and the granddaughter passed somebody coming up the stairs towards the flat. When she got to the flat, she found one of the rooms was locked from the outside. She let herself in, and her grandmother's body was there.
And of course she raised the alert, not knowing that the person she saw was undoubtedly the killer.
And a police constable came and looked for suspicious circumstances. When the granddaughter mentioned to him that the door of the room had been locked from the outside, at that moment the PC said, "Hold everything. This is a crime scene."
Police were worried this might be just the beginning of a gruesome spree, but were struggling to find a motive.
There's a myth about serial killers that they're all sexually compelled, not by a long shot. Many are motivated by greed. Anger will motivate some, power. Some have no particular reason at all. They just start doing it and then they keep doing it.
Police were faced with a mystery.
Forensics were nowhere near as well developed as they are now, so what evidence you did have didn't really lead you anywhere.
The Metropolitan Police were struggling. They were struggling to find any clues, and they were getting murders all over the metropolitan area. There was a pattern building up that worried them. They drafted something like 50 officers in at the Metropolitan Police as a supplementary murder squad, because if that spate continued, it could have been the worst serial killer they've ever known.
With the murderer on the loose in the streets of London, the police were feeling the strain. However, the next revelation in this case was more bizarre and brutal than anyone could have possibly imagined. In London, in the mid-1970s, the Metropolitan Police were faced with a series of mysterious killings. At least 2 women had been brutally murdered in their own homes.
The Metropolitan Police were realising that this was becoming prevalent, and they didn't know who did it. They had no idea where to go.
However, the killer would next strike in the unlikeliest of locations, and in a way that would shock and terrify a small community. Shorne is a peaceful village near Gravesend on the outskirts of London.
It's such a pretty, picturesque village. Very, very good community and spirit. It's a perfect place to live and work.
It was home to Father Anthony Crean, a well-respected member of the community who was known for helping out the needy.
Father Crean was a priest at the Corpus Christi home called the Malthouse in Shorne. He had something like 12 nuns living within his confine.
He loved nature, and he always was accompanied by his Jack Russell. Where he went, Jack went. He often called on parishioners just to pop in for a chat and say hello. And I don't think Jack was always welcome. However, it made no odds to Father Crean.
On the 21st of March 1975, the peace in Shorne was to be irreversibly shattered. Detective Inspector Ken Tappenden was at a black tie event with colleagues 14 miles away in Maidstone.
We had a call about 8:30 from Gravesend Police to say that Father Crean had not returned home, although his Jack Russell had. So there was the only thing that put anything of suspicion in one's mind. Nothing came in for another couple of hours, And eventually we get another call saying he still isn't home, and now it's dark and people are beginning to get quite worried about it. A number of us go straight to the scene, straight from the hotel in our DJs.
Nothing could prepare Ken Tappenden for the gruesome scene that confronted them.
A nun was actually screaming, and it would appear that the priest had been found dead in a bath filled with blood. He was in the bath in his duffel coat, he was in his Wellingtons, and he had a woolly hat on.
This was a horrific, horrific murder. This was a frenzied attack with a medieval weapon that caused horrific injuries and wounds. He was floating in a hideous mixture of blood and water.
The detective superintendent who had come from headquarters found an axe with blood on it under the stairs, which is next to the bathroom. And this is the weapon that killed Father Crean. And it was covered in blood. But there's no doubt the blunt end of it was used to smash the skull. I know you get used to it, but there's every now and again you'll find a murder scene that is disturbing. And when you see the ferocity in which he was attacked and killed, you can't help but keep thinking about it.
News spread fast through the tight-knit community of Sean.
When we heard Father Crean had been murdered, everyone was completely in shock about it. Somehow we were all kind of, that thing couldn't happen on our doorstep, you know, and we really felt very, very, you know, sorry for him to have such a bad end to his life.
Desperate to find the killer, Detective Inspector Tappenden had a moment of inspiration. He remembered a case involving Father Crean from 18 months earlier.
Having sat up all night, puzzling through this one, what came to my mind was a young man in his early 20s called Patrick Mackay.
Father Crean had been helping Patrick Mackay stay out of trouble when Mackay betrayed his trust.
Father Crean had tried to befriend Mackay, tried to give him a helping hand, and in return, what does Mackay do? He robbed the Catholic priest of a cheque, altered the cheque and cashed it.
The day we told him he's being charged with the cheque, he went quite berserk, and I thought then, this man's disturbed, and something disturbed me about him.
For fraudulently cashing the cheque, Patrick Mackay had been defended by Robin Clark.
We're in a deprived part of Kent where it is a struggle for youngsters to get jobs, and he just struck me as being part of that background. He was just a normal criminal charged with offences involving Father Crean.
Remembering the connection between the priest and Patrick Mackay, Ken Tappenden acted quickly.
I asked Bob Brown and Mick Whitlock, who were two of my officers, and just said, I think it's Mackay. I don't know where he is. Go and find him.
Two detectives were assigned to find where he was living. He was living actually by that time in a hostel on the Great North Road in London, a hostel for ex-offenders, ex-prisoners. But he wasn't there.
The hostel owner actually said that he was staying with a family called Cowdrey.
They had no option but to simply go to the electoral register and find all the cadres who lived in South London. And they had a remarkable stroke of luck, because the first family they knocked on the door, not only was it the right family, but Mackay was actually in the house, sitting on the sofa.
Mackay quickly admitted the murder, but shockingly he would not stop there. Patrick Mackay would go on to reveal a litany of crimes that would stun the interviewing detectives. So just who was this man, seemingly capable of such horrific and bloody murder? Patrick David Mackay was born on the 25th of September 1952. He grew up in Dartford with his parents and two younger sisters. Roland Hayes went to school with him.
In the playground, we was all like young animals running around, and some good people, some bad people, and Patrick Mackay was one of the bad people. He was in a special class, what will be called special needs children these days, but in those days they were just trouble. And he was like a little terrorist. There would be a girl standing there talking to her friend, and he'd come running in from a side that he couldn't be seen from, blindsiding her, and he would shove her, or pinch her, or push her, and then run off again. The girl would be crying, stuff like this, and he'd be laughing, looking over his shoulder, laughing, you know, and running off, planning his next move, you know.
I think it can be said that Mackay had a very stressful childhood. Mackay's mother, Marion Mackay, was a Creole lady from Guyana, and his father, Harold Mackay, had served in the army in the Second World War and was very, very traumatised by the experience.
When Patrick was young, his father often led Patrick into what had happened in those years and how it scarred his life.
If the father finds great satisfaction in regaling children with these gory stories about people getting blown apart or him killing people in the war, and that's going to have a child, you know, imagining what that looks like and how do I get close to this? How can I feel part of this?
Harold Mackay was a seemingly mild-mannered accountant, but he'd been traumatised to the extent that he turned into a very violent and alcoholic character who often assaulted his wife and often attacked the little boy, Patrick. Mercifully appears not to have attacked his two daughters. And it was in this atmosphere of domestic violence, I'm afraid, that Patrick Mackay grew up.
Whether it's beating mom, getting drunk, bullying people, being belligerent, whatever the father's doing, if the son thinks that's where power lies, that's going to influence what the son later becomes.
There are so many clues that Mackay's childhood was unhappy. For example, his habitual cruelty to animals, his tearing the wings off birds, his even putting, a most disgusting thing, he put a tortoise on a fire and then when it was dead threw the carcass over the adjoining fence.
People who develop into killers later who are bullies are going to be looking for living creatures that they can easily control and that they can experiment on. And obviously the closest thing to that would be the family pet or neighborhood pets, or you go out in the woods and torture animals out there. You're basically looking for some living creature that will feel pain so that you can see what it's like to inflict this. We certainly see that in the past of a number of serial killers because that was, to their minds, a very good starting point.
Mackay's strange behaviour did not go unnoticed by his school friends.
After school, we used to go walking around the town a little bit, and We used to go exploring, and we used to climb up this verge through the trees and then to some wasteland, and we used to play around up there. The first time I went up there, actually, with Patrick Mackay, he picked a bell-shaped flower, filled it up with his urine and drunk it in front of me, which I was absolutely gobsmacked, you know, when he did that, which was the reason he did it. It was just to shock me, you know. You know, he seemed to have a split personality, you know. I mean, you could talk to him, he seemed to be normal enough, but then he would suddenly run off on these long legs and snatch something off of a pub table and run off with it or something like that, you know, or run into the front of a shop, snatch something and run out again. That was the sort of thing he did. And then he would come back, you know, with me, and then he would be normal again, you know.
As he grew older, Patrick Mackay's behaviour would become ever stranger and more extreme. Where it would lead him would stagger the nation and earn him the dubious title of the most dangerous man in Britain. In the early 1970s, London had been plagued by an unexplained crime wave of muggings and murder, culminating in 1975 with the discovery of Catholic priest Father Crean in a bath of his own blood. 22-year-old Patrick David Mackay was arrested for his murder. As investigators looked into his past, they would uncover a disturbing tale of madness and violence. When he was 10 years old, an event would occur that would have a profound effect on the already unpredictable young boy.
One day, Harold Mackay left for work as usual. The last thing he said to Patrick before he left was, remember to be good. And on his way to his office in London, he had a heart attack and died. He was only in his early 50s. Patrick never saw him again, did not attend the funeral, which took place in Scotland, and to all intents and purposes, his father had just walked out of his life and there had been no closure. Mackay never really adjusted to the fact that his father was dead.
When the father dies, that will rip a huge hole in his world because his identification lies with the father. And it's almost inevitable that he will now take on the father's characteristics and sort of replace the father.
When Dad died, don't forget he was only 10, and he took over his armchair straight away and bullied the whole family, beat the girls, beat Mother, just like Father had done.
I knew him before his father died, and I think that the die was already set. Maybe he found himself in a more excitable state, he was more emotional afterwards, but I think, you know, he was, even at that age, you know, what he always was.
After Mackay's father died, Marion Mackay found life very difficult, though heaven knows it must have been fairly difficult while he was still alive. But from that point on, things went from bad to worse.
Marion Mackay moved with Patrick and his sisters to Gravesend. But it would not prove to be a happier family home.
Mackay was always angry, I mean, not least because of the kind of awful upbringing that he'd gone through, and it didn't take very much to provoke him. The police frequently were called to domestic disputes at the house, and Patrick Mackay was behind all of them.
We had NSPCC officers here, police were called out. Either he was beating up his sisters, sometimes beating up his mother. He would actually scream and shout. The neighbours would get alarmed. They would call the police. Sometimes Mother called the police because she couldn't handle him.
One local officer in particular, Amy Tapp, was called to the Mackay family home on many occasions, as often as 4 times a week.
He was just like a caged animal. He was emotionally sort of very disturbed and at the time very mental.
Amy Tapp bore the brunt of so much of this because she knew him backwards. She could always talk to him. She could always make him become rational again. and yet she said he'd kill.
Well, I felt that he should be at least put somewhere and shut away so that nobody could be damaged as a result of what his sort of mental reaction to people. He was violent and obviously would hurt somebody in the end.
Whenever things got too bad, Mackay would be placed in various institutions to try and improve his behaviour.
Extraordinarily, in spite of the trouble, violence and dissension that he caused in his home to his mother and his sisters, Mrs. Mackay, his mother, always agitated and campaigned to get Mackay out and back home, and very, very often succeeded.
They was only ever stable when he was away, and yet Mother always wanted him home. And when he got home, it was nothing but upheaval for the whole of the family.
Between the ages of 12 and 22, Patrick Mackay would be in and out of various special schools, juvenile remand centres, psychiatric units and prisons on no less than 18 occasions.
He was in and out of mental hospitals, but nobody seemed to appreciate the seriousness of his personality disorder to actually do something about it.
Every time he was put away, he was trouble. He would get out on the roof of the Stonehouse Mental Hospital, rip the slates off. He went into Courtleys, which was an approved school, remand home. They beat him and locked him in cupboards. He had a very bad life himself.
He would have resented being there, he would have hated being there, and he would have been treated very badly when he was there. And this isn't the way that a young boy can be corrected. You know, you're only going to make them worse like that, you know.
Those who evaluated Mackay early on called him a psychopath, and I think that's probably obviously correct. He had no interpersonal bonding or attachment to anybody. But it's more than that, because he was just so strikingly antisocial.
It was just him against the system, and the system was very harsh.
The authorities and psychiatrists were at a loss to know what to do with the disruptive Patrick Mackay. And rather than improving, his violence and depravity would escalate. In addition to numerous petty crimes, Mackay turned to arson, attempting to burn down a church.
Fire setting is arousing. Individuals could set a house on fire, a car on fire, a field, and they feel incredibly powerful by watching what they had done. So those are not good signs at all in somebody's background.
He was sent to approved schools, one after another. Interestingly, at one of the approved schools, when he was only 15, one of the teachers described him as a potential murderer of women.
Despite this chilling prediction, Mackay was once again permitted to return home.
About a year later, when he was being treated in a nearby mental institution, one of the psychiatrists described him in writing as a cold, psychopathic killer. Amazing foresight, as it turned out.
In 1968, age 16, Mackay was diagnosed as a psychopath, someone showing signs of antisocial behaviour and a lack of remorse.
We are finding that psychopaths in particular do not have the same brain structures as normal people. Clearly, something's going on with their decision-making process that is involved neurologically and not just psychologically.
Mackay's erratic behaviour led to yet another stint in Moss Side Psychiatric Hospital, where he demanded to be known as Franklin Bolvolt I, a name he proclaimed to be feared and remembered like Hitler's. In fact, Mackay developed an extreme and bizarre fascination with the Nazi regime.
Mackay became interested in Nazis and Nazi atrocities because this interested him. He was interested in committing atrocities. This is what Mackay's psychology was. He wanted to hurt people in any way he could. And so reading about or seeing others like the Nazis, what they did to other people, was immediately interesting to him.
He had himself photographed with a swastika on one arm. His room at home, covered in memorabilia, became a kind of Nazi shrine. He was under the impression that he was 100% pure Aryan. He was, of course, 1/4 black.
With such a checkered past and erratic, violent behaviour, it was no surprise Mackay's name was top of the list when Ken Tappenden was investigating the horrific murder of Catholic priest Father Anthony Crean. But with Mackay now in custody, the true depths of his depravity were about to be exposed.
When we had him in custody, naturally his fingerprints are taken, and those fingerprints turned out to be from the murder of Adele Price.
Mackay's fingerprints had linked him to at least one of the murders the Metropolitan Police had been unable to solve for over a year.
Met Police got involved, and very quickly it became quite a drawn-out police investigation.
It was marvellous because they then went through a whole succession of murders in the metropolitan area where they'd been searching for this person, and it was Mackay.
Mackay would admit to several other murders, but the extent of the list of victims shocked even the most seasoned detectives.
A lot of these murders came from his own word of mouth, but we checked them out and they were murders. One was the murder of Heidi Minilk on a train at Catford. He opened the door and threw her out on the track, dead.
Frank Goodman was a tobacconist in North London. He was bludgeoned to death in his shop just after he closed, and his shop was robbed.
The murder of Mrs. Hines in Hackney, right next to the Hackney Theatre, he said, when he's interviewed about that one, that murder was as easy as washing my socks.
The picture became clear. Mackay had been responsible for all the muggings, the murders of the old ladies, the murder of the Catholic priest.
Now they had their killer in custody, the police started piecing together the motives for these heinous crimes.
Mackay started out killing elderly women. Why? Because elderly women are a more vulnerable target as opposed to a younger woman who has the potential to fight back.
The odd thing about the crimes that Mackay committed, he was able to establish a relationship of trust with well-to-do, middle-class old ladies who were perfectly willing for him to carry their shopping and to bring him into their homes and offer him, I don't know, a glass of water, a cup of tea, whatever. But at all events, he had a manner sufficiently plausible, sufficiently charming to take these old ladies in.
Robbing and murdering vulnerable elderly women made some sense to the police. But why murder his supposed friend, Father Crean? In amongst Mackay's belongings, police found photo booth pictures that Mackay had taken the day before he killed the priest.
He's snarling in them and he's got his hands clawed out like a cat, and you can see his eyes are gone. They portray a person that's schizophrenic, and I think they portray a person that is so troubled that the only place for him is to be in custody or incarcerated medically.
Patrick Mackay used to use the word peculiar about himself. He said that in the days leading up to a murder, he felt peculiar, whatever that meant, and he then said he felt peculiar in the days after a murder. So I don't think he revelled in the crime. I wondered at the time whether even he knew exactly what he was doing.
We're now in the centre of Sean, only 100 yards from where Father Crean lived, and I know that he frequented the Rose and Crown public house here, and it was well known that he actually came with Patrick Mackay on the odd occasion.
Mackay has an ability to pick out vulnerable people and then he attacks them. Father Crean was very nice to him, was very supportive of him, and in Mackay's mind, I believe he equated kindness with weakness. He saw a weakness with Father Crean and he attacked him.
When Patrick murdered Father Crean in that terrible way, I think Patrick was kind of experimenting on what it would be like to raise his level of aggression to that point and see how it affected him, whether it disgusted him or what he had done, or whether he loved it.
Mackay later described how after killing the priest, he filled the bath and watched the battered body of his victim floating in the bloody water for over an hour.
He's calm by now, he tells us. I was very calm then. It was just a wonderful, wonderful experience.
There's something very mad about hanging around with the dead body of the person you've killed. In the case of Isabella Griffiths, he hung about with the body, filled the sink with crockery and shoes. Again, with Adele Price, he hung around listening to the radio. He actually fell asleep in a chair while the body was lying there. Very difficult to get any kind of sensible, sane explanation for that kind of behaviour.
He said it was nearly as good as the experience of when I saw a tramp coming over Hungerford Bridge who had been drinking methylated spirits, and he coughed. And he said, I just thought he looked dirty and filthy, and I picked him up and I threw him over the bridge. He said, and what was wonderful about it, he fluttered down just like a bird.
Mackay's psychopathic tendencies and extreme violence were clear. But was he always destined to be a murderer? Was Patrick Mackay born to kill? Patrick Mackay was arrested in 1975 for the brutal slaying of 64-year-old Catholic priest Father Anthony Crean. The man, who would later simply be dubbed the psychopath, would be charged with several counts of violence and murder.
I saw in a newspaper a banner headline, Patrick Mackay, he's the most dangerous man in Britain, it was. That's how he was described, and it went on to say that he'd killed somebody and possibly others. It was disbelief to start with, that I should have known such a person, you know, and disbelief and shock and surprise.
Mackay was to be represented in court by the very man who defended him when he fraudulently cashed Crean's cheque almost 2 years earlier.
He'd have a good day and a bad day, and on a good day, you know, you could be talking like you and me now. Bad day, he'd more or less throw the book at me and walk out the door. It became apparent that the number of years that he'd been going through institutionalisation, foster homes, unhappy circumstances at home, drunken father who was a bit of a violent man, and his mother, who was quite volatile. That of itself had taken its toll on Patrick. Life hadn't been good to him, and I think it did leave its mark on his character and personality.
I mean, he went in and out of mental institutions The authorities must have known they had a very serious case on their hands. And there's no doubt he was released by the authorities, unfortunately, to kill.
The police believed that Mackay had committed up to 13 murders, but could only decisively prove 3 of them. Isabella Griffiths, Adele Price, and Father Anthony Crean. His appearance at the Old Bailey lasted a mere 20 minutes before Mackay was judged guilty of manslaughter by reason of diminished responsibility. Journalist Nigel Nelson was there.
Patrick Mackay was a chilling presence. When you saw him in court, it was almost as if his body didn't belong to himself. It was like it belonged to somebody else. And so if ever there was a case of demonic possession, whether through mental illness or whether it's real, then Patrick Mackay was certainly it. The headline on our paper was Devil's Disciple, and I think that summed him up rather well.
Patrick Mackay was sentenced to life imprisonment, but the question remains, was he born to kill?
I don't want to say anybody was born bad, but if out of all of the individuals you look at, Mackay is probably somebody who had a very, very strong predisposition to behave in an antisocial way.
Personally, I don't think that Mackay premeditated these murders. I just think something triggered this manic rage in him. Some little gesture, some action or other.
It's often said as an argument against corporal punishment that if you're violent to somebody, they'll be violent back. And taking the analogy of Patrick Mackay's childhood, one can't help but feel that there might be something in that because of the violence perpetrated on him by his father.
I think with Mackay, the environmental influences are so dominating. From the moment he's born, violence was a norm, and he gravitated toward it. So that really is a nurture issue much more than a nature issue.
At the time, he was the personification of evil. There is no question that while he was carrying out these hideous crimes, he was completely overtaken and obsessed by evil. He never set out, as far as I can see, to do any of these things. They just happened, and that was what was so scary about it. If ever the term cold-blooded applies to anybody, it was Patrick Mackay.
Was Mackay born to kill? Well, he had a very disturbed and violent childhood, but then a lot of people have that and don't become serial killers. There must have been some genetic kink or other in there that set off the manic rages. The combination of his background and this personality trait was a perfect storm.
Could he be plausible? Yes. Could he be friendly? Yes. Could he be unpredictable and dangerous? Totally. And could he kill? Yes. Don't know if he's born to kill, but from the age of 10, he was going to kill, and he did, repeatedly.
Next tonight, the last ever season of CSI New York continues here on Channel 5 with an eerily quiet and shocking case.